video. So it's never been a better time right now to jailbreak the PS5. At the same time though, because there are so many methods that you can use to jailbreak the PS5 with their own pros and cons, it can be confusing for anyone looking to jailbreak for the first time. So in this video, I'm going to go through the recommended jailbreak methods to use depending on what firmware and console version you're running. So it does not generally matter too much what type of console you have, if it's a fat, slim or pro, they can mostly be treated the same. What really matters is the firmware that the console is running. So there's two main factors that determine what jailbreak options you have. The main one is the firmware version, which is your system software version, and you can find that out by going into the settings, system, and then system software and console information. And if we zoom in on this long string of numbers, this section I've highlighted here is your firmware version. So my console is on firmware 12.00. You can currently jailbreak from firmwares as low as 1.00, so 01.00, all the way up to firmware 12.70, 12.70. So PlayStation patches jailbreaks and new firmware updates all the time. So the lower the number, the older the firmware is, and the more options you have to jailbreak it. Lower number equals better in this case, so note down your firmware version number that you have here. The second important factor is whether or not your console has a functioning disk drive, as there are jailbreaks that can be loaded from a game disc or Blu-ray disc that give you more options to jailbreak your console if you have a disc edition console. Now you might think that you can just buy the official disk drive for a Slim and install it and get it working and then use it to jailbreak, but the problem is that disk drives that are bought separately need to be paired to the console using PSN, which requires the console to be on the latest firmware, which patches all of the jailbreaks. So you cannot pair a new disk drive while remaining on an older firmware for jailbreaking. So you need to have a console that already has a functioning disk drive if you want to be able to use the jailbreaks that use the disk drive. Now the last thing to mention here is that all jailbreaks for the PS5 are tethered, which means you have to launch the jailbreak every time you power cycle the console. So any jailbreak method that is quick to load is going to be preferred. So now that you know what firmware your console is on, we can start looking at your options. So if you're on a older firmware from 1.00 right the way up to 5.50, you can use the web browser to jailbreak using an exploit called UMTX, which is by far the best option. You do not need a disk drive for this one, and it can be set up easily by accessing the jailbreak host site through the user guide page in the settings to get to the site es7in1.site and selecting one of the jailbreak host sites like Zeko's here. You load the jailbreak by clicking the button, and a few seconds later the jailbreak will be running and you'll be taken to a page of payloads that you can run on the console. Now once you're jailbroken, you can also install a shortcut on the home page so that you can load the jailbreak again quickly by selecting the shortcut, which will direct you straight to the page to load the jailbreak. This is the most mature jailbreak currently, and it can be used to load things like Linux on the PS5 to turn it into a Steam machine / gaming PC through a hypervisor exploit, and my web browser guide is linked down in the video description. So the web browser jailbreak definitely recommended on firmwares 1.0 to 5.50. It was patched after 5.50 though, so from firmwares 6.0 and higher, the web browser exploit is not going to work. So from 6.0 to 10.01, your best bet is to use the YouTube jailbreak with the YouTube application to jailbreak the console with the Lapse exploit. Now this jailbreak can be installed by restoring a backup file, which does reset your console. That's one downside to this jailbreak, is that you will lose any installed games or save data that was already on your console beforehand when you restore the backup file. Now once the backup is restored, you can then load the YouTube application and it will just run through the jailbreak. Once complete, it should load the payload manager, which you can then use to load your payloads on the console, just like with the web browser jailbreak. Now this is where things change depending on whether or not you have a working disk drive in your console or not. If you do not have a working disk drive, then you can continue to use the YouTube jailbreak right the way up to firmware 12.70, but it will use an exploit called P2JB on firmwares 10.20 up to 12.70, which stands for Patience to Jailbreak, because it can take up to 50 minutes to load this jailbreak. Now, when loading the jailbreak from the YouTube application, a progress bar will then appear, and it will display how much longer you have to wait before the jailbreak is loaded. Once complete, it will then load the payload manager as normal. But again, not great because you have to wait 50 minutes to load the jailbreak. I also have a full guide for setting up the YouTube jailbreak linked below, but that's pretty much your only option if you have a digital edition console right now. However, if you have a working disk drive, then you have other options to jailbreak with a Blu-ray disc. Now you can use a Blu-ray jailbreak from 6.00 to 12.00, but 6.0 to 7.61, it will use the UMTX exploit, which you can run with this ISO file from Victorious X. 8.00 to 12.00, the Blu-ray jailbreak was patched. So you actually need to use another jailbreak like the YouTube app to jailbreak once, and then run a payload that will unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak. Once unpatched, I recommend using the Blu-ray Jailbreak autoloader from its PLK, the ISO file there that you just burn to a blank or rewritable Blu-ray disc, which uses another exploit called Poops, which will jailbreak within a few seconds, and then load the payload manager as normal. So this jailbreak is really recommended for people between firmwares 10.20 and 12.00 with a working disk drive, because your only other options are to use the jailbreak that takes 50 minutes on those firmwares. Instead, you can just unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak and load the jailbreak within a few seconds, which is a much better experience than waiting 50 minutes on those firmwares. Again, I have a video guide for unlocking the Blu-ray jailbreak, which is also linked below. Now, there is one other big benefit to using the Blu-ray jailbreak, which is that you don't need to completely reset your console. So 6.00 to 7.61, you can just load a Blu-ray disc to jailbreak, no need to restore a backup or reset the console. On 8.0 to 12.0, you need to use another jailbreak to unpatch it, as we've discussed, which would mean resetting your console to get the YouTube jailbreak installed to unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak. However, what you can do is make a backup file beforehand of your own console with all of your save data and installed applications before you install the YouTube jailbreak. Then you can restore that backup once the Blu-ray jailbreak is unpatched to get all of your save data and games back on the console with the Blu-ray jailbreak still unpatched, so that you can then end up with a Blu-ray jailbreak without resetting your console completely. So that's the other benefit of using a disk-based exploit like the Blu-ray jailbreak. And of course, any firmwares from 12.20 up to 12.70, you'll just have to stick with the longer 50-minute YouTube jailbreak for now until there's a better option. Same if you're on 10.20 up to 12.70 without a working disk drive. You'll just have to stick with the 50-minute jailbreak. And of course, firmwares above 12.70, 13.0, 13.20, 13.40 are not currently jailbreakable. There are jailbreaks in private. Maybe they will be released at some point in the near future, but you'll just have to sit tight and wait for a new jailbreak to release to be able to jailbreak those higher firmwares. So just to recap here, use the web browser jailbreak from 1.0 to 5.50. Then from 6.0 to 10.01, you can use the YouTube jailbreak with the fast Lapse exploit, which only takes a few seconds. If you happen to have a Blu-ray drive, you can use the YouTube jailbreak to unpatch the Blu-ray drive exploit on 10.20 to 12.0 to be able to jailbreak within a few seconds using a Blu-ray disc. And if you don't have a working Blu-ray drive in your console and you're not able to burn discs, or you're on a firmware above 12.0, then you just stick with the 50-minute YouTube jailbreak up to firmware 12.70. And if you don't want to reset your console by restoring a backup file, remember that the Blu-ray drive exploit works further back to 6.0 and beyond, so you can always use that one without having to reset your console. There is also another option for not having to reset your console with the YouTube jailbreak if you're on a firmware between 6.0 and 10.01. If you have an activated account, now you can check if your account is activated on the console in the sign-in screen by hovering over your account and pressing the options button on the controller. And if it brings up a menu to appear offline, online, or busy, that means your account is activated. And if any of your accounts are activated, then you can actually install another jailbreak method that uses the Netflix application to jailbreak. And once you're jailbroken with Netflix, you can then use that jailbreak to manually install the YouTube jailbreak without resetting your console. Then use the YouTube jailbreak as normal to jailbreak from then on. So that way you can get set up with the YouTube jailbreak without having to reset your console by restoring a backup file. So it's kind of a way that you can get around that. And again, I have a guide that walks you through that process too. Now, there are other jailbreak options like specific games that can be used to load jailbreaks, but those are generally less convenient to set up and use compared to the YouTube jailbreak. Hopefully that helps shed some light on what jailbreak method you should be considering for your PS5. So that's going to do it here for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always,